they had everything. They could have had everything. And I found it very hard initially to see what they were rebelling against. When the Vietnam War came along and the big the peace demonstrations, at least focused on something. But initially, when they started dropping out from society, I was baffled because I thought it was a pretty good society they were dropping out from. And I couldn't see what they had that was going to replace it or that was better, that could possibly be better.
The hippie movement took place during the early 1960s and late 1970s. Hippies were defined by their loud music, wild dress, and far-left beliefs. The word hippie comes from the word hip, which was used to describe beatniks who were considered to be the precursor to the hippies. The beatniks set the stage for the hippies as they were the first group to challenge societal expectations. The members of the hippie movement were products of the baby boom who grew up in the affluent suburbs during the 1950s. As they reached high school and college age, they began to realize that they did not agree with the beliefs that their parents subscribed to. Instead, they believed in free love and self-expression, not wealth and status.
All my things to people who need them, who want to live in the society with others, and start anew inside myself.
I remember arriving at college, and the worst part was my parents left. And there I was sitting in this room. It was pouring. And next door, there were two guys playing a record by a group called the Mothers of Invention. And what it was Susie Cream Cheese. Or I guess it was the Thugs, and it was called Susie Cream Cheese. And what it was it's an oral account of sexual intercourse. Screaming next door. And here I am, this naive kid, and I have no idea what all this noise is. There's an upperclassman next door with a whip, who's banging on the floor as hard as he can. And then there's this guy who is obviously, I'd never met anybody who used drugs, who is obviously on drugs, writing on a table outside my room. Now, when I say writing on a table, I don't mean writing on a piece of paper on a table. I mean, this guy's writing on a table. And I sat there in the rain listening to this thinking, my life has just ended. And I thought, I better write somebody a letter. And I wrote, here I am at college, and this is wonderful. I'm just loving being here, thinking, I hope I can make it through the week.
College students made up most of the hippie generation. Many dropped out of college in rebellion and moved away from where they had been living to start fresh. A popular destination for the hippies was the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, which was considered by many to be the epicenter of the hippie counterculture movement. As most hippies did not have a steady income, many lived together in shared living spaces called communes. In communes, groups of friends would live together in cheap houses, farms, or lofts.
This is where I sleep. It's kind of, ventilated. There's no windows or anything, but
yeah, I see.
It's not really too bad.
This meant that after pooling their small funds, a big group of friends could buy one house to share. Communes promoted equality and peace, and there was no head of household, and everyone was treated the same regardless of gender or sexuality. Many communes catered to vegan and vegetarian lifestyles and featured crash pads, or places where people who didn't live in the house could spend the night.
Still living under their parents' roofs, younger members of the hippie generation were not allowed to make such a drastic change to their lifestyle. They eventually found ways to rebel on a smaller scale, beginning with their appearances. Both male and female hippies sported brightly colored tops and bell-bottom blue jeans.
Like if you have a pair of blue jeans and you get a hole in it, you put one patch and another, and they'll wear them until they fall apart. And if they last for 5 years, that's all the better.
Shirts were cool if they were homemade and everyone wore their hair long, all while peace signs and flowers covered everything. Tie-dyeing gained popularity because it was an easy and inexpensive way to customize clothes. Sandals were popular shoes, although many chose to go barefoot to feel closer to the earth. All these trends were accepted by both men and women because hippies did not believe in exclusion.
it's a way of expressing yourself, like a freedom of doing doing what you want to do. That's all I brought with me.
Everyone does it because it's cheap. Yeah. This shirt cost me 99 cents. This cost me, I got 2 for 87, you know?
You take drugs?
No.
Would you ever take drugs?
Yes.
You would?
Yeah.
Why?
I'm experimental.
While the Beatniks were fond of using alcohol to aid in their artistic process, hippies turned to new drugs like marijuana and LSD. After the pharmaceutical boom post-World War II, drugs were easily accessible and their effects, both long and short, were often unknown.
The authorities were very interested in. Everybody that took LSD felt that they were undergoing enormous personal changes. They weren't the same person after having LSD. And there was a scientific study. It was done by a Rand scientist. And in 1966, he published his findings, and what he said was, even though all of these people said that they felt enormous changes had taken place, the personality test showed that they were largely the same person in every area but one area. And this was called the Ways to Live scale. The Ways to Live scale indicated that one dose of LSD stimulated enormous changes, whereas the person taking the test might have said, it's important for me to get a corporate job, it's important for me to have a good car. After one dose of LSD, they were saying, I think maybe a contemplative lifestyle might be what I want to have. I think I'd like to travel before settling down. I think maybe I want to look for some spiritual value in my life. Things totally changed around.
Because of their openness, hippies were the first to experiment with drugs. Often hippies found the group aspect of drugs to be most appealing. They would spend hours doing drugs with their friends and create art, listen to music, and share their ideas.
The grass relaxed us. It allowed us to be the people we really are, or really were.
Others cited the spiritual effects of the drug to be their biggest appeal.
I took a hit of Osley White Lightning acid, and I became an instant hippie. I fell in love with nature, and I looked at the rocks. I could sit there looking at weeds that were normally an item of horror to my parents, and trip on the intricate structures of ragweed and thistleplant. And I began to become a discerning acid head. I only took it every 3 days, mind you, so that I could clean up properly and all. But the real issue was when I went to San Francisco in 1967. In the summer, it was the love that brought me into the hippie movement.
The Council for a Summer of Love proclaims a Summer of Love in the city of San Francisco. We believe that Haight-Ashbury is the focus of a universal spiritual awakening. The Summer of Love is an expression of this awakening. We call upon the world to help us celebrate the infinite holiness of life.
The Summer of Love was a massive social gathering that occurred during the summer of 1967. Over 100,000 people gathered in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood of San Francisco, which was the epicenter of the hippie movement, to join in a popularized version of the hippie experience.
We're going to have about 200,000 people in Haight-Ashbury. Haight-Ashbury is an area of about, 8 blocks, maybe 10 blocks, a little more if you consider the fringe areas. That's I guess, about one person for every 5 or 6 square feet.
There was festivals and concerts and the religious groups popped up, and the Hare Krishnas were there, and we'd all go and hang out over in one group and chant and om with them, and then we'd go to another group and dance with them, and it was like a big party.
Free food, free drugs, and free love were available, along with a free store that gave away basic necessities to anyone who needed them. But with the rapid influx of youth coming into Haight-Ashbury, the town could not accommodate the people, leading to overcrowding, homelessness, hunger, drug problems, and crime. Even with this, the mainstream media's coverage of the event drew many young people's attention to the hippie movement.
CBS News, without any flowers in its hair, is in San Francisco because this city has gained the reputation of being the hippie capital of the world. I'm Harry Reasoner.
This is the largest group of people ever assembled in one place. The important thing that you're proving to the world is that 500,000 kids, and I call you kids because I have children older than you are, 500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music, and have nothing but fun and music, and I God bless you for it.
Another major event was Woodstock. Woodstock was a 3-day-long music festival attracting an audience of over 400,000 people to a dairy farm in New York State in August 1969. 32 musical acts were performed for the crowd. The hippies who attended Woodstock were there for the peace and love as well as freedom. Woodstock created a social and political revolution. The hippies who attended were protesting the Vietnam War by singing along to the controversial songs performed by people like Jimi Hendrix and Creedence Clearwater Revival. The lyrics in the songs blatantly denounced the war and everything that was going on in Vietnam. This event gained attention from American citizens, which infuriated some and inspired others. Woodstock is considered a pivotal moment for music history and the counterculture movement.
Because of hippies' sexual openness, alternative lifestyles such as homosexuality and transsexuality are generally more accepted. Young adults have become more sexually active at a younger age because of the influence of past
generations. Turned on, in any sense, is 100% better. I mean, just fantastic.
I turned on a girl for the first time this vacation, and she said afterwards that, like, anytime I touch her, it was just soft and tender. You know, it wasn't the harsh or an act. It was just like floating in. You know, just like two jellies almost gliding into each other. It was just different.
I sat for an hour with a girl and we both just explored each other's faces with our fingers, you know? It was just beautiful. I mean...
Generations. The hippie movement was a time of not only exploring oneself and rebelling against society, but it was also a time of acceptance. After the hippie movement, African Americans, working women, homosexuals, nudity, and non-traditional apparel all became generally more accepted. Without the hippie movement, the United States would not be as free and as open as it is today.